People who were in prison during 9/11, what was that like? Hey, a question I can answer. I had just recently arrived in the system after sitting in county for a while, so was still in diagnostics where all your processing like medical and affiliations and job placement stuff happens. I remember being still asleep when a guard turned on the lights and rolled the TV into the dorm. Intakes had been torn down by the last batch, or maybe the batch before them. I remember my bunk was right by the plug, so I could sit there and be right to the side of the TV. My house was popular for a few days, lol. Everyone was confused at first. What the hell, boss? Why are you waking us up? But his demeanor showed that something serious was up. Big gray-headed dude, usually jovial, was like, "You'll quiet down and look at this." We thought it was just a crash at first, but he answered, "No, we're under attack." I'm not super sure about the timeline. He must have brought it on shortly after the Pentagon got hit. I remember seeing one of the towers fall, at least, but the memory is fuzzy. We were one somber bunch of hoodlums, though. They left the TV in the dorm all that day, and most of the next. Like others have said, we didn't go out for a few days. We didn't go full lockdown, because they kept running the diagnostic stuff, but I can't speak for the rest of the camp. Among the inmates, it was gossip as usual, hyped to the walls. There's gonna be a war, they're gonna let us out, gonna write my recruiter and get out of here, blah blah blah. The couple Middle Eastern looking guys got some shit, but no beatings, at least in my pod. Again, stuck in intake, so don't know about the rest of the camp. There was perhaps an increased sense of camaraderie, and lots of talk from the veterans in the group. I guess I've never really thought about that morning from the perspective of anyone other than myself or a New Yorker before. Strange memory. Thanks for asking, person. As a former inmate, this is the first answer I've read that looks like you were actually there. Especially the part about people talking like they're going to get let out for some bullshit. We didn't know what happened. We all thought somebody escaped. That's what the older prisoners told us anyway. No TV, no newspapers, no radio, no work. We were kitchen staff and served 2 meals per day, and we didn't have trays. Instead it was bagged lunch for everybody, PB&J and a carton of milk, for 3 days. After the first 12-15 hours the older inmates were telling us it could be a riot in another block, because it was too quiet. Any stirs by the inmates, the loudspeaker would come on and tell us we are on lockdown. When we found out, 72 hours later, it was total shock. We were in California and we didn't know if our families were okay or what. I had to wait 2 hours to make a phone call to my family. I had to have my family in CA contact family in NJ and tell them to accept the collect call from me. I wouldn't take anybody's word that everyone was alive. That's awful. So are they dead? No, they all alive. It was shortly after count had cleared, and I had just walked outside to the yard before going to my job in the education department. The inmate I worked with asked me if I heard that we were at war and that they had attacked New York. I remember my belly was in a knot thinking, oh shit, we're at war and I'm stuck in here and my family is out there. I grew up in the 80s and remembered that Cold War fear that the Russians were gonna take over the country, so that's what I was thinking when I heard war. I was only a few years into a very long sentence, so I didn't know what to think. When we went into the classroom we rigged the TV to catch channels over the antenna. We were all glued to the TV and I'll never forget watching people jump to their deaths. I called my folks and said we loved each other, and my dad reassured me that we weren't going to be taken over by another country. We had like 15 channels on TV in our units, and I remember every single channel had the news on. Even bet, if I remember right, that first day, the only network that didn't change programming was the Cartoon Network. I don't know if it was so kids and adults could have something safe to watch or what, but it was a good thing. I also remember the teenage daughter of someone who died on one of the planes said that for a long time after her mother died, she'd watch nothing but the Food Network because it was the only network that never mentioned 9/11. Same here. I was 5 on 9/11 and have no memories of that day. My mom tells me that I was the first one in the house to realize that the things falling from the buildings were people, not debris, and she sent my brother and I into the other room to watch cartoons, since the kids' channels were the only ones to keep to their regularly scheduled programming. She's still thankful for that. Who wants to explain to a 5-year-old that thousands of people were just senselessly murdered, and we are probably about to go to war? I was teaching first grade. I had to explain it to 25 6-year-old kids. Kinda hard to do when their innocent little faces are looking to you for an explanation/reassurance. I was in a maximum prison in Texas at the time. I was in the infirmary talking to the PA when a nurse came in and told the doctor that a plane had just crashed into the WTC. A little bit later she came in again crying, telling the PA that another plane had just crashed into the second tower. All three of us came out of the room into the lobby where someone had rolled a TV in. We all watched the news broadcast, the people crying, footage of the planes crashing, everything. In prison, prisoners segregate themselves according to race and then by city. Then there's more segregation between prisoners and guards, nurses, etc. But at that brief moment, we were all standing there watching the TV and all those lines of separation were gone. When those towers were attacked, we were all attacked. We were all feeling sadness, worry, anger. I remember walking back to my building and everyone was quiet. Guards weren't giving us a hard time, inmates were more quiet than usual, just a dark cloud over the prison. How long did that dark cloud have an impact? Just a few days and everything went back to normal. A lot of things happen in prison and a person learns to adapt and move on. And you have to do it quickly. It's not the place to dwell on bad things. They come weekly, and you can't dwell on them. Was it easy to adapt once you were out? Yes and no. I know that's not really an answer, but there were so many details in daily living that we just breeze through, that we don't even think about. I have a friend just getting out, and I wonder how long it will take for him to get used to things on the outside, after being gone nearly 3 years. Michigan level 2, medium security. I was laying in my bunk listening to Howard Stern on my AM/FM cassette player during count time. It was very weird. I thought he was doing some bit for a few minutes and was like, WTF. He kept his show going longer than it was supposed to, and I just stayed in my cell and listened. I don't recall if they put us on lockdown. Honestly, from what I remember, it was still fairly normal afterwards. That must have been a mind. I can totally believe listening to Stern and thinking it's a fucked up joke. I remember my friend telling me what happened. I didn't have a TV at the time, and I completely thought he was joking. I won't forget the feeling of dread that crept over me as I realized it wasn't a joke. Did you actually listen to him, or are you just making that assumption based on his shock jock persona? I was a daily listener from the early 90s up through his end on terrestrial radio, and he definitely wouldn't have joked about something like that. He may be a lot of things, but he isn't really about causing mass hysteria. I didn't listen to the broadcast live, but I have recently gone back and listened to the Howard Stern show from that day. I believe you can find it on YouTube. I thought it was very surreal experience to listen to it after the fact, but I would imagine it would be even more so for you. I've thought about listening to the broadcast again, but I've mostly gotten over the feeling like I'm back in prison feelings, so I don't wanna go there. I'm not sure what it's called, but I would instantly get the transported back to prison, caged, nervous feeling when I smelled a certain lemon lime cleaner smell, or various other smells or sounds. At least I don't get too many of the f***ed up dreams anymore, probably because of the weed. I was in prison in Missouri at the time, minimum security camp, Tipton. Even though there wasn't much of a security risk inmate wise, when the planes hit it was about 30 minutes later everyone was told to report back to our buildings. Temporary lockdown was in place, and the closest military base had fighter jets on patrol almost immediately. Even though we had to go on lockdown, almost everyone was already in a cubicle watching as the second plane hit. Holy f*** was about the most common expletive, as was that f***ing real? Religious groups were the main concern, as there was a strong Nation of Islam and Muslim population. Luckily I was part of a multi-faith group, being with my main Wiccan group mainly, that spoke and shared beliefs, experiences, and sat in on each other's respective faith meetings and ceremonies. It was a very unique and interesting in between sort of group and time for about a month after 9/11 happened. I like to think the openness our eclectic mix of faiths possessed helped bridge the gap between opposite groups and their response to such an extreme point in our history. 9/11 be damned. I wanna know more about that Wiccan group you were in during your time in prison. How was that like? Were people actually into the whole Wicca religion? Was it like some sort of prison gang for hippies? None were really hippies. There were a few who studied things like the Golden Dawn stuff, Crowley works, even some mysticism and shamanism were included within. There were even a couple of Satanism and demonologists in the group. When I was in basic they used to call out for different religions on Sundays, and when they called out Buddhism I was, like I've always been interested. They stuck me in a room with 5 Wiccans, and left us there alone with no chaplain or anything. I was expecting to hear a Buddhist chaplain speak or something lol. Needless to say I was extremely out of place and never did that again. I was in prison from October 2000 to June 15, 2002. On June 3, 2001 I took my Shahada, became a Muslim. As a white inmate this was pretty difficult. I was the only white Muslim in the prison I was in, so there was some extra heat on me for that. But it had subsided. September 11, 2001 I was awoken by another inmate, turned on the TV, and watched the second plane hit live, while the first was smoking. We, the Muslim community, were all approached by the staff, and were all offered protective custody status once they figured out it was a terrorist attack and Osama bin Laden was one of the masterminds. It was a very trying time. We would make salat, pray, on the yard in the evening together. It was a scary time. We had a few meetings with outside ministers and imams where we all tried to come together and understand things. Sorry if this is off topic or overly personal, feel free to ignore it, but why'd you decide to convert? How did it affect your life in prison? And since I was never religious, wasn't raised anything really, this was my second bit in prison. The first I was wild, and when I was paroled I was also wild. Freedom didn't last long. At the prison I was at, when you first get a housing assignment you don't go straight to a cell, there's an open bay dorm that housed maybe 20 guys. The guy in the bunk next to me was Muslim. He would pray and I would ask him questions, and he was very kind and generous and understanding. He gave me his Quran. It wasn't just a regular paperback, it was one his imam had sent him, with the Arabic and transliteration. I literally felt overcome with emotion one night probably a week later and took my Shahada right there with him in front of those other guys. I felt peace, at ease, like I was worth something. Since release I've met great people, experienced so many different cultures, and grown as a man. I haven't even had a traffic ticket in 16 years. I'm not perfect, but it works for me. You know, I've heard similar stories about people hearing the Quran being read aloud and being so moved by it and eventually converting. It's really fascinating how powerful some things are. Glad to hear you found something like that while there.